It's time for Real Estate 101 with the Karey Brown team from Realty Executives Preferred Advisors.
Good Sunday morning to you. This is Karey Brown, broker-owner of Realty Executives Preferred Advisors, and you're listening to Real Estate 101. Today, I am here with Angie Schreiber, and Angie is with Cradle to Career Literacy Center, and she's out of Emporia, so she drove quite a ways to be here today. Good morning, Angie.
Good morning, Karey.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good today.
So we're going to be talking about something that's a little off the beaten path for the show. We're going to be discussing literacy issues and dyslexia. I had a friend talk to me recently about, the need in the school system to have better programs for dyslexia. Each school district has, their own different, I would assume, courses or, help with this type of thing. But Angie is here to enlighten us on how dyslexia works and what we can do to help people better.
Well, I think there is one fallacy in your statement, and that is that school districts have something for dyslexia. And what we find is that dyslexia is probably the most misunderstood of all learning disabilities, because even though the word dyslexia is in the special education regulations, it's not defined within the regulations. And most of our teachers get very little training about dyslexia within their coursework at the universities. And so when it comes to talking about dyslexia with teachers, there's a lot of misunderstandings and misconceptions. And so we really don't want to talk about it. We don't want to use the D word. We just would rather talk about the general, broad definition of learning disabilities. And within that, that's like talking about cancer without saying you have a specific type of cancer. As in, we're just going to treat cancer, not breast cancer or colon cancer, which I find would be very disturbing if you were a cancer patient.
Absolutely. So what exactly is dyslexia and how does it work?
Well, dyslexia is one of a type of learning disability, and it focuses on reading. Many people think that dyslexia is seeing backwards. Because children with dyslexia can reverse letters. But that is not the core part of dyslexia. Reading is a phonology problem. And phonology is a big word for sound. Think of a phonograph record, because phonographs produce sound. And reading, if we think about it in its most basic form, is no more than taking the sounds that we speak and mapping them to letters. And before we invented the printing press, there was no dyslexia because we didn't read. So we invented this learning disability when we invented reading. And what dyslexics have trouble with is taking the sounds of our language and mapping them or creating them, putting them together with the letters of the alphabet. We don't speak in individual sounds. We speak in words and sentences. But when we learn to read, we have to take the words that we speak and break them into individual sounds, or we call them phonemes. For example, if I ask you the word cat, can you tell me the sounds in the word cat? Can you?
Oh, can I?
Yeah.
Okay, so cat would be C, except for it sounds like K.
Okay, not letter names, but what are the sounds in cat? At.
Yeah.
Well, children with dyslexia struggle with knowing those individual sounds. Or another one is dog, D-A-G. And so if you can't hear those individual sounds, how do you know then to put the letter D, O, or G with those individual sounds?
That makes sense.
Okay. Well, it goes even further. Then we expect, as we teach reading, we take word families such as at, which is in cat, the last two letters, and we say, well, let's take off C or K and add D, and what do we get? Dat. Or let's take off D and put on F, and we get fat. And if we take off F and add we get
Matt.
And we take off and put on P, and we get Pat. Sounds very easy for us, but our children with dyslexia struggle with manipulating those sounds. And then those are just beginning sounds. What if we take off ending sounds or vowel sounds? And to be able to read, we have to do all of that chunking. Not just reading, but spelling. Spelling is the same way. And that enables us to decode words accurately and fluently.
Thank you so much for explaining that. So tell me, what would be something you would want someone with dyslexia or the parents of children that have dyslexia to know about the services that are offered?
Well, I think the basic thing we want parents to know is that if they suspect that there is something wrong or if their child is lagging behind, that they know their child better than anyone, that we know that dyslexia can be identified as early as 5.5. We don't want to use the weight to fail, that children do not grow into reading anymore. We used to believe that boys and girls matured into reading. We needed to wait to first or second grade to identify dyslexia, and people still do believe that. We know that's not true anymore, that children by the end of first grade should be reading 47 words per minute fairly accurately and fluently. And if your children are not meeting these benchmarks, you really should be concerned, and the school should be concerned, and doing some kind of active intervention with your child.
And that would be in the form of, say, an IEP, correct?
Well, not necessarily an IEP. They could be doing what's called in Kansas, or any state, a Tier 3 intervention. But they should be doing a Tier 3 intervention would be something fairly intensive in a small group of 6 or less, making sure that your child is getting caught up in reading so that they are meeting these benchmarks. If you do suspect that your child has a learning disability, you can ask the school district to do an educational evaluation or a special education evaluation on your child. They cannot turn you down if you make that request to do a special education evaluation. You must put that request in writing to the special education co-op or to the district, and you have to give consent for that evaluation. And again, you're probably not going to get an evaluation for dyslexia, but you are going to get an evaluation for a learning disability.
So why do you think that is? Do you think they just aren't educated enough on dyslexia, or why wouldn't the evaluation include that?
I think typically it's they don't know enough about dyslexia. And oftentimes what they are saying is that dyslexia is a medical diagnosis. Even though we know it is not a medical diagnosis, it is an educational diagnosis. It's just easier to say it is a learning disability, even though dyslexia is in the special education law. However, when we go as advocates to IEP meetings, we don't necessarily fight for a definition or fight for dyslexia on the IEP. You can look at a child's data and say if they're not accurate and they're not fluent, we know they need intervention. If you have an outside evaluation done and the child is been diagnosed as dyslexic, it can be put on the IEP if you have an IEP. So it's kind of a convoluted system.
It would seem easier to have a clear-cut guideline.
It is. It would have a clear-cut guideline, but if you have that definition and that diagnosis, then school districts then need to provide appropriate interventions for your child, and that can get expensive. So sometimes it comes down to money, which it shouldn't, but it does.
Why do you believe that there isn't enough funding for this particular or any special education? What is your take when in seeing the schools on the actual funding for it?
Special education funding comes from several levels. A lot of the money comes from the federal level, and the federal government has never funded special education at the 90 or 95% level that was promised when the original law, which we all called Public Law 94-142, which we now call IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And the states were hoping, for more federal money because their public schools are required to educate all public school children. And without federal money, then the states naturally have to fill in what the federal government doesn't cover. And in Kansas, as you know, we've cut public school money, which would then include special education money. And so if you carve out a special disability like autism or dyslexia or any special disability, then that targets funding for that disability instead of allowing school districts to spend the money in a more broad area, But I think parents are beginning to say, we want that targeted instruction. And you will see it in other states. Texas has a dyslexia law. Missouri has a dyslexia law. Arkansas has a dyslexia law. So states around us are beginning to pass dyslexia laws so that students are specifically screened. Missouri's law goes into effect, I believe, in January, where all students will be screened for dyslexia. I think right now 38 states have some kind of law requiring screening for dyslexia. Will Kansas eventually have one? Probably. It's been discussed in several legislative bodies in the past.
So we're going to listen to a word from our sponsors here in just a second. But in the second half of the show, we're going to be talking about Cradle to Career Literacy Center and how they help school districts to learn more and to offer these services for those with dyslexia, and also how Greenbush has become involved in that program. Thanks for joining us. Join us again here in just a few.
Southwest Topeka has a good neighbor. State Farm agent Jim Garrison, now at 29th and Urish. If your current insurance situation has you going around in circles, get off the roundabout and stop in and meet Jim and his wonderfully efficient staff. Let Jim Garrison give you a quote and make the Garrison comparison. He's confident that with State Farm's competitive rates, the right coverage, and his unmatched service, you'll want to make him your new insurance agent. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there, and Jim Garrison is there for you. Northeast of the roundabout at 29th and Urish.
Thanks for joining us again. This is Karey Brown, broker, owner of Realty Executives Preferred Advisors, and you're listening to Real Estate 101. And we are back with Angie Schreiber, and she is with Cradle to Career Literacy Center, and they're out of Emporia. And so we're going to be talking about the different services that they have to offer. Obviously, there is a need for this in the school district. There's also lack of training. And we're going to discuss all the different ways that your company helps with that. So let's start with testing. What do you do to test the children?
We actually have several levels of testing. The first one we typically start out with is called a reading assessment, and we do the phonological testing that we were talking about earlier to see if a child has phonological awareness or understands the sounds of language. We then look at where they are in terms of their reading, if they're at what we call benchmark or at grade level. And we'll do a test of written spelling, because if a child can't, if we're going to do a school-based identification of dyslexia, we have to answer yes to 2 questions. Can they spell? Yes or no. And do they have a phonological deficit? And so we start there. And from there, we can plan an attack or plan a course of study for your child without really telling you whether or not they're dyslexic, unless you really want that diagnosis. And many parents don't want, don't necessarily need an official diagnosis. What they want is their child to be able to learn to read. And so that's a very quick way for us to know, where do we start a child, and where do we need to start them on their reading path.
Which takes us to tutoring. So how do you start tutoring them?
Well, we have several different programs that we can use that are all research-based. If it's a very young child, we have early language and literacy units, which are appropriate for preschool children. And they were written at Nye House Education Center in Houston, Texas. And they provide early phonology for children in preschool, ages 3, 4, 5, and also very good rich vocabulary development. We also have a reading readiness program, which provides children with the early reading skills they need before you actually introduce books and reading. Many children need this program. It's good for kindergartners, first graders. We've even used it with second graders who are not yet ready to learn to read. The main program that we use is called Take Flight. It is an Orton Gillingham-based program developed at Texas Scottish Rite Hospital in Dallas, Texas. They've had a dyslexia learning lab since the early 1960s. They've had several different programs, but they continue to research and update their programs. The research on this program is well developed. It was done in public schools, which is why we like the program. And the program can be done in groups of up to 6 students, which makes it economical for public schools to do. Because we know many Orton Gillingham-based programs, which is kind of the gold standard for dyslexic students, can only be done one-on-one. And that's not economically feasible for public schools to do.
Gotcha. And let's talk about the training that you guys offer.
We offer training in all of these programs to public schools and also to parents if they qualify. You have to be have a bachelor's degree to enter into Take Flight. It is a graduate level program. You can get graduate level credit from Emporia State University when you complete the program. So, that program is available to teachers. We are also working with Greenbush, which is the service center for Southeast Kansas. And for those of you who are not into education, a service center provides professional development for school districts to their teachers, and we're trying to work with that service center to provide this kind of professional development for school districts.
And you guys also host seminars for the parents and grandparents and educational providers. So tell me about that, and how can they get more information?
We do provide seminars. We try to do them every other month. We do a Dyslexia 101 seminar, which is kind of basic what is dyslexia, what is it not. We do a learning disability simulation. What is it like to have a learning disability? We do that for parents. We also do that for districts, for classroom teachers. We do it for, we actually do it for ESU professors quite often for their teacher training classes so that teachers know what it's like to have a learning disability. We also have a movie from Harvey Hubble called Dyslexia, the movie, and it shows his life as a dyslexic and what it's like to have dyslexia. They can contact Cradle to Career. We have a Facebook page. We do have our website, unfortunately, is undergoing reconstruction, but they can always call us at 620-208-READ, which is 7323. Again, it's 620-208-7323.
And on Facebook, what would they be looking for?
It's Cradle to Career Literacy Center.
So again, to find them on Facebook, look up Cradle to Career Literacy Center.
Yes.
And so let's talk real quick about, you guys also do some work with ADHD?
A little, yes, we do, because 50% of the children who have dyslexia also have ADHD. They coexist 50% of the time. And oftentimes we tend to treat the ADHD and we miss the dyslexia as also the cause of why a child is struggling to learn to read. And so we'll have seminars on ADHD and what you can do to help your child with ADHD. And also the reason why oftentimes Take Flight helps children learn to read is that the lessons move quickly and you move from item to item and you do a lot of repetition, and thus it keeps the child engaged because you're not belaboring any point. And that's why children with ADHD often lose interest in school, is because things aren't moving quickly enough for their brains.
So my staff would tell you that I'm definitely ADHD.
Ah, okay.
I joke about it all the time. You just have to keep me moving. If you don't, I'll be all over the place, like herding squirrels sometimes.
Well, is that easier than herding cats?
I don't know. Probably.
No claws.
Yeah, absolutely. So is this just for English only, or do you offer these services for Spanish speaking also?
Well, Emporia, as you know, is a heavily Spanish-speaking district. And we also offer many of these programs in Spanish. We have Esperanza, WOW, and WELLS. And these programs were developed by Dr. Elsa Cardenas-Hagen in the El Paso, Texas area. And Elsa wrote these programs based on the same multisensory language that for dyslexic students, because learning to speak for Spanish-speaking people is kind of the same as for dyslexic people. Spanish has only 22 sounds, while English has 44. And so Spanish-speaking people learning to speak English have to learn 22 new sounds. So it's kind of the same as what we talked about earlier with our dyslexic students not hearing sounds. Well, when you're learning a new language, you have to learn the new sounds of that language. And that's what our language learners have to do with English. El Paso, where these programs have been used, their literacy rates have gone up tremendously by using these programs. And so we've been using them in Emporia with the students that we work with and have seen quite an increase in the students' increase in literacy skills with the students that we work with.
So let's say one of the school districts is listening today and they want to get a hold of you to find out more about your programs, or maybe say bring you in to talk to the faculty. How should they get a hold of you?
They can call us again, and our phone number is 620-208-7323, or they can email me at Angie@c2clc.com.
So basically what you're doing is you're giving these children a voice. I mean, obviously it's going to be a struggle for the parent and the children to come to terms because the kid doesn't understand typically, especially at 5.5 years of age, that they're different or that everyone else doesn't think the same way that they think. And it's hard for them to vocalize what's going on. So I would imagine that would cause them to act out. So obviously what you're doing is a huge service to help bridge that gap and to bring more fluency between the parents and the children to understand what they're going through.
Definitely. I think many of these children are misunderstood. I had to learn about dyslexia because my oldest child was diagnosed with dyslexia in 3rd grade. We knew he was bright. He was articulate. He loved science. He could build anything, but yet he couldn't read a word. And people kept telling us to read to him. And I finally told the special education teacher that if I had a nickel for every book I had read to this child, I would be a millionaire. I think we have to stop thinking that if we read to children, they will learn to read. Children learn to read by being taught how to read. It's not that we shouldn't read to children. That's how my son got his vocabulary, all his background knowledge. But dyslexic children are taught to read by learning letters and sounds and how to put the letters and the sounds together, and then how to read those words fluently. And so, yes, we become an advocate for the child, an advocate for the parents, and hopefully then information for them and the school districts, because together we can solve illiteracy. And that's the only way we're going to solve illiteracy in this country, is if everyone learns to read and succeed.
So again, real quick, how do they get a hold of you?
They can get a hold of us on our Facebook page, Cradle to Career Literacy Center. They can call us at 620-208-7323, or they can email me at Angie@2clc.com.
And if you're looking to buy or sell a house, be sure and give us a call at 785-213-5188. You can also check out our website. Again, we're on 4 MLSs, so we cover from northeast Kansas, all the way down to the Emporia area, clear to the Missouri border, and out to Junction City. Check that out at nekansashomes.com. Thanks for joining us on Real Estate 101.
Thank you for listening to Real Estate 101 with the Karey Brown team from Realty Executives Preferred Advisors. Tune in again next Sunday at 11 o'clock for Real Estate 101.